Just goes to show how tough these guys are. They're hewn from a solid block of aluminum. No problem at all. Few tough lads, pun intended. So the LAD comes in a small presentation box that has a little tiny cardboard sleeve. On the side, there's a little pull tab. Once you slide it out, there's foam covering. The only accessories included are a short USB cable, as well as the instruction manual. Hey Flashaholics, today I'm covering the Manker LAD in these 3 different colors, as well as 2 different emitters. Now I'm going to disclose right off the bat, if you've been following my reviews for a while, you likely know I don't talk about the summary until the very end usually, but Manker had sent this particular one for review. I was just so smitten by it that I went out and purchased these 2 to include them as part of the review. As you saw in the opening of my video, these little guys are seriously tough. They're hewn from a solid chunk of aluminum. Now right off the bat, let's get into the design and features. I love the fact that it has this trapezium shape. I thought it would have been a little boring actually if it was a plain old rectangular. And the reason for that is because they carved this attachment point. I hesitate to say wrist strap because I believe the intentional omission of a wrist strap was Manker's way of emphasizing that this is an EDC tool that lives off of either a keychain or perhaps a carbiner. It does feature a side switch which now bears their familiar Quinlan logo on it. And that side switch is translucent so you can see the charging status as well as the dragon breath function. On the business end, you're going to see the center emitter comes in 2 flavors, either an XP-G3 or Nichia N219B. And on either side of that center emitter are 2 what Manker refers to as straw hat, but I think they really meant dome LEDs. I believe they are 3 millimeters and they are red. The body only features a carving of the manufacturer name and the motto, and on the back there's a few symbols. There are no distinguishing marks on these lights, so you can't easily tell from the outside. However, if you look into the emitter, you could easily tell because the Nichia, which is the one on the top, has that very distinct YAG phosphor color to it. On the side here is a rechargeable USB port cover that features a micro USB port, which as you know is pretty much nearly ubiquitous. So it adds great versatility in being able to charge it on the go. And that pretty much covers the designs and features of this light. To charge the LAD, simply take the included micro USB cable, plug it into the side, and once charging is complete, that light will stay on steady and it will initiate a trickle charge. Now one thing of note is that even while charging, you could use the light in its lowest mode. So I don't know, if you just have an emergency, you need to use it tethered, but while charging, you could use it that way. Unlike the U11, if the charging is interrupted, it will not automatically turn on the light, which is a good thing. However, once you finish charging and you unplug it and you want to use the light, a long click will not work. It will always have to be a short click, in which case it will immediately go into strobe mode. And then if you long click to shut it off, then short click again to access the low mode, then it kind of resets it, if you will. Now I'm not sure why that is, but I definitely would like to see this behavior change, so I'm going to provide this feedback to Manker. There are 4 Phillips screws that hose down the front aluminum plate. They are easily removable because it's not thread locked. I would suggest a PH00 tip. Once you get that removed, you can see the main body is, like I said, a single solid piece. The shell here, and within you will see the circuit board. Remove the faceplate. You can see the TIR optic there, the 2 red LEDs. This one's the Nichia 219B, as well as the lithium polymer battery. Now one thing you will note about the way that the dragon breath functions is actually 2 individual blue LEDs that sits underneath that Quinlan button. Thus it gives that pulsating flash, 1 on each side, and leaves the middle black. Let me shut off the light so you could get a better view of that. Size-wise, I threw in some of those freebies that they give you when you order lights from, like, say, Battery Junction, Lighthound. Here's the Enova one. And this particular one is reminiscent of the Photon series. I forgot the manufacturer, but this one was by Longhorn Tactical. Threw in a AAA battery there just so you could get an idea of the overall size. So yes, it's a bit bigger than your typical keychain size flashlight, but not by too much. Though of course, owing to its unibody's aluminum construction, it is a bit heavier than these. The LAD's UI is not really too drastically different than the other lights. Again, there are 2 group modes. With the light off, a short click will enter low immediately, and then with each subsequent click, it'll cycle to medium, high, red, and then back to low ad nauseum. Now with the light off, a long press will enter the last memorized mode, of which the red can also be memorized. Thus, thereby, you can also invoke the red immediately without destroying your night adapted vision. A quick double click with the light off will immediately enter the strobe mode. Each subsequent click will cycle through all of these group 2 modes ad nauseum. It will not actually go back to the group 1 mode unless you double click again to exit out of there. A long press in the group 2 modes will shut off the light, but it will never memorize these group 2 modes. Now let's get into that. With the light off, a quick click will always access the lowest mode, and each subsequent click will cycle through all the rest modes from medium to high, and then finally the 2 LEDs, and then back to low mode again. With the light on or off, 2 quick presses will engage the strobe mode. Now I find this a little tricky to engage because you need to press it very, very quickly. So as you see there, I totally failed. Then each subsequent click after the strobe will engage the other blinky modes. Next step is the dragon breath function. Then a SOS. And then last but not least, a beacon mode. Now the next click after this will continue the group 2 modes. It will not actually go back into the group 1. Simply long press to exit out of there, quick click to get back into the other modes. There is memory function, so let's set this to medium. And to memorize this mode, simply long click to turn it off. And to engage the memorize mode with the light off, long press, and you're back in medium again. The group 2 modes are never memorized, and that's pretty much it. It's very straightforward. In a departure from their previous low voltage warning feature, the LAD actually will just simply revert to red. Give it a few seconds there. Instead of indicating it via the side switch. So as you can see, I set it into low mode, but it automatically went into red mode. Regardless of which mode you're in, if it suddenly shifts down to red, it means that the battery is low and you'll need to change it. So same with the medium. And last but not least, with the high, you see draining it sufficiently so it's going down very fast. It's currently about 4:30 here in the northeast US, and right now there's a pretty much overcast because the clouds are blocking the sun. But I wanted to give you a real idea of 2 things. One is the color of the actual light itself, so each LAD, and then also the tint color as well. The black and pink ones are the XP-G Cool White, and the gray one is the Nichia. So right now the sun just came out from the clouds. I'm going to shine the XP-G3 version here on the left side in the shade, and then come over here to the right side in the direct sunlight. Again, keep in mind that this is the afternoon sun, so it will be a little bit warmer. Again, here it is on the left hand side, and here it is directly in the sunlight. So definitely a cool white temperature to it. Here it is on high. I think medium is the best so you could get a good idea. Now we have the Nichia version. Again, here it is on the shade, and here it is on the right side in direct sunlight. This is on high. And I do have the white balance set in sunlight mode, which I feel this is pretty reasonably accurate. Now I'm going to shine them both side by side. So here you can see the XP-G on my left, Nichia on the right. Now you got Nichia on the left, XP-G on the right. And now we're going to shine down some green foliage, at least whatever I have around. Here's the XP-G3, and as you can see, very cool white light. Put that onto high. I would say the color is fairly representative of what I'm seeing in real life, if perhaps a tinge yellowish, meaning the leaves look slightly yellower than what I'm seeing in real life, but overall fairly accurate. Now here we have the Nichia version, almost a direct replacement for the sunlight. Very, very nice tint to it. Here they are side by side, XP-G here and Nichia right here. Should be fairly obvious the difference in the tints there. And then now on this guy here, I shine on the bottom here. Let me do XP-G first down here. Nichia, XP-G, Nichia. So now we get to a nighttime outdoor comparison of the two. Here's the Nichia 219B. I have this locked in on sunny white balance. It's ever so slightly I say this is a little bit whiter than what I'm seeing in real life. So meaning in real life, it's a little bit warmer tint than this. And yes, that's a little solar light on the right hand side there. But the output is overall maybe a tad little bit brighter than what I'm seeing in real life. Now by comparison, here's the cool white version. Probably in real life, to me, it's a little bit more just one tick north of neutral of this. So meaning what I'm seeing here on the screen, it's a little bit cooler than what I'm seeing in real life. It's not that bluish. It's not a bad white overall. And here's the Nichia back in the action. You can see the shrubbery side by side. Nichia, XP-G. So I'm going to put the Nichia left here. Nichia on the right here. XP-G on the left here. And then swapped. So it's the main difference you're getting between these two. I wouldn't say the color rendition is like all that accurate because by comparison, here's Prometheus Alpha running at XML T5 4C tint, which to me I find is just one of the absolute nicest, what I would consider truly neutral. Of course, subjective, but this tint I really, really like a lot. To me, the 219 of the LAD is a little bit warm. Now I would say for this XML, in real life, it's a teensy bit warmer than what I'm seeing on the screen. But like I said, this to me is just a true, like one of my favorite neutrals versus this. This is a little bit warm, but overall not too bad. Now here's the PL10 throw-in for comparison. Now I always say the PL10's neutral is, to me, much more preferred than the LAD. Again, totally subjective. I just happen to like this tint a little better. It's a little more neutral to me than, say, the LAD, which is definitely a little bit warmer by comparison. So I'm going to go with the medium output to make it a little bit more comparable. It's a PL10. Here's the LAD. And here's the PL10. PL10 actually looks cool by comparison, but in real life what I'm seeing is, like I said, it really is a very nice, pure neutral white to my eyes. Versus the LAD's warmer tint. PL10 again. And here's the PL10's low mode. This is again very close to what I'm seeing in real life. I don't know how many lumens is that solar light, but it's fairly accurate comparing to what I'm seeing. Here's Manker's LAD in the Nichia version. Here's Manker's LAD, the black version XP-G3 emitter. And now the pink version, also XP-G3 emitter. So in terms of the throw summary, I didn't have anything in the way of a similar sized light. So what I decided to do was compare it against with similar sized diameter in terms of the overall reflector to match the TIR size. So those are mainly the AAA lights. So I got the Bronc Light BT01, the 390 Ti High, as well as the Christmas edition of that. I also included Manker's PL10 in here. Again, if you're not familiar with my throw summaries, left side in blue is manufacturer specs as well as the battery that I used, and right side here is what I measured. So right off the bat, you're going to see that the top performer was the black XP-G3 version. Manker had claimed 860 candela, translate roughly into 58.6 meter beam distance. I measured 972, close to 973. That translates to 62 meter beam distance. Now here is a good example of sample variation. So the pink is supposed to be identical, right? Because it's also XP-G3, but both in terms of the throw and the runtime, which you'll see later, it measured lower, albeit still beating the manufacturer claim. So on the pink one, I got 62 meter beam distance. The PL10 was one where I measured drastically lower than what the manufacturer beam distance was. So not sure what the cause is there. I'll probably recheck it when I get to PL10 review again, but that's what I measured for now. And in terms of, like I said, the COMPARO AAA lights, they're kind of there, if only because they use the reflector, even though they're orange PO, but this one does use the XPL high. That one has the older XPG2, and this one uses the XPL V4. Now for this one, the gun grade, which carries the Nichia 219C, there is no blue bar because Manker hasn't specified what the throw distance was. But in any case, I measured 56 meter beam distance for that one. So in summary, even though the manufacturer's claims are this, but you got to remember that's per NCF01 standards, which means that at this distance, you're measuring around 0.2 lumens, which is basically nothing. Your eyes are not going to be able to see that, right? I think realistically, if you took these values and times it by 2 in terms of feet, I think that would be much more realistic in terms of what your human eyes can see. Not even necessarily fully dark adapted, but at least so that you can make out what you're shining on. So bottom line, these are not throwers. They were meant to be, like I said, an EDC projecting decent amount of light output and still a decent amount of throw while living off of a keychain or a carabiner. In terms of the XP-G3, it's also roughly about 35 to 40 for the main hotspot, and overall width I would say it's roughly about 80 degrees-ish. Now that's the beam angle for the red LEDs. As you can see, they're not exactly both perfectly aligned, and I believe, if I'm not mistaken, they had changed the LEDs since the first run. These I'm not sure if they're first run or second run, so I'll get in contact with Manker, but overall all three of them are very similar. They don't quite align very well. Let me step up the exposure a little so you can see the angle. Overall beam width I would say is roughly 20-ish degree for the main and roughly about 40 degrees for the overall width. The Nichia version is not too different in terms of the beam width. It's also roughly about 20 degrees for the center. In terms of the overall width, it's also roughly about 80 to 90-ish degree. Now this is on low. The red LEDs, as you can see, not too vastly different than the XP-G3 version, with the center crossed over roughly about 20 and the overall width roughly about 40-ish. For the runtime, here's what I captured for all of the Manker LADs. Manker had claimed 300 lumens for the XP-G3 versions and 230 for the Nichia. I got as high as 275 and 226 respectively. This is what I alluded to earlier during the throw summary, mentioning that there is definitely sample variation because essentially these two should be identical, but as you could clearly see here, it's not. The Nichia, I also wasn't quite able to get up to that 230 coming in at 191. Now, these three all take a nosedive after initial turn on. I mean, they do turn on initially, at least the black one, over 300, but as you can see here, within 1.5 minutes, it dropped down to roughly a tick over 100 lumens and then slowly maintaining a very gradual decline along with the other two. There really isn't a huge difference. Now, in terms of the total runtime, Manker had claimed half an hour, but it actually measured quite a good bit over that. So the black one came in at 79 minutes, pink one at 75, and the gray at 69. So bottom line, all of them more than double the claimed runtime. While this may seem a little disappointing, I kind of have a feeling that this can be improved upon, which I'll get into more details in my initial summary, but I feel that bottom line, there's a minor air gap between the emitter board and the body itself. Thereby, if they could find a way to bridge that gap in a future iteration, I have a feeling that these performance numbers will improve drastically. As I had disclosed at the beginning of the video, I was really smitten by these little guys, and they're aptly named LADs. The reason being that, first of all, like I said, I really enjoy the trapezium shape. I think it's rather unique, and love the fact that it has a built-in beefy keychain or carabiner ring there. And the fact that it comes in a small form factor is USB rechargeable and fits very nicely in my hands. Tough as nails, as you saw in the intro. This is one of the lights where, yes, I did not quite meet the manufacturer specs. And the reason for that is, as I had mentioned in my dissection video, the reason why I took it apart was I wanted to see what was inside. Now, first off, even though they're pretty tough, I don't think they're pretty waterproof because these switch covers pull off right like that. So you can see the electronic switch right there. This goes right back on. So after replacing it, if you notice that this thing goes off because it does twist very easily, just put your thumb on it, just give it a twist. You can see there that that's not perfectly aligned, but just put your thumb over it, give it a bit of a twist, and then you could change the alignment. Well, that's for OCD types. Now during the dissection portion, even though there was a rubber O-ring around the TIR lens, I actually didn't see one to seal the emitter board around the inner diameter of this body. But the main thing that I noticed was that the emitter board, there's a tiny little air gap that doesn't quite touch the rest of the body. So the reason I didn't capture the temperature, because I didn't really measure this all that warm, but when I took it apart, I measured with the flare, which you can see here, as you'll notice, that temperature rises rapidly, and unfortunately, I just so happened to shut it off right there at the very end, which you saw. It reached 170F, and that's pretty darn hot. So that's why I have a feeling that if they had a way of manufacturing the board so that it perfectly meets with the body flush, it's able to transfer more of the heat away and into the body. Of course, then the body can get potentially hot, but I have a feeling that it would be able to maintain the high a lot longer than at the current levels, which kind of steps down to roughly about 100 lumens after a minute and a half or so. However, though, every once in a while, you're just going to love a light. It doesn't matter about the lumens, doesn't matter about the beam pattern, whatever. It's just because the functionality, the form factor, there's other factors about a light, right? So it may not necessarily be the complete package, but in terms of an EDC, I've been rotating these guys around for the better part of a few weeks now, and they're just fantastic. I love it. It's like, you know, I have immediate access to strobe. That I always enjoy because I work in the city and I'm not a huge guy. I don't have a fighting bone in my body. If the strobe gives me a chance to blind someone and run away, hey, all the better, right? So I love the fact that it's there at the ready, but yet hidden so I don't have to cycle through it. I have a low, although this is in moonlight mode, but the fact that I can actually have these red LEDs, memorize that, and then be able to access it immediately without destroying my night vision, that's fantastic. Could take this camping with me as well. This is something that I would feel perfectly comfortable gifting, and as a matter of fact, that's exactly why I purchased the gray and the black, is to give it out as gifts to friends. But so the 219C, in general, I just don't like warm emitters at all. I've never been a fan of them. I don't mind neutral cool white only because, like I said, I'm a lumen whore, so I prefer the higher output. But if I had to pick between neutral or warm white, it's going to be neutral white all the time. So the 219C, not really crazy about this tint. It's like I said, it's just a little bit warmer than I prefer. But perhaps, I don't know, in the future, maybe I'll dig into this to see if I could reflow a 219B on there. But in between these two, the XP-G3, yes, it is a cool white, but it's not a horrible cool white, not like angry blue or anything like that at all. So I kind of find like, you know, this little guy packs a punch, can throw out a beam to, realistically, I would say roughly about 100 feet not necessarily the 60 meters or so that they claim, but overall, it's just kind of, for me personally, it's a complete package. But the only thing is that I wish perhaps they had implemented that electronic lockout feature. That would have been pretty nice. This button is a little bit stiffer than their other lights, although not quite as stiff as the MK41. The timing to access the Group 2 modes, you really have to kind of, get there quickly. So I don't feel like you could accidentally invoke it while you're cycling through the Group 1 modes, as you can see here. Kind of really have to be pretty quick about it. So for those who don't foresee using the blinkies anyway, I guess that's a plus. What I do hope is that with our collective feedback to Manker in a future iteration or revisions to this light, that they do find a way to improve that bond and reduce the gap between the emitter board and the body, as well as potentially maybe even lowering the output slightly. It doesn't always have to be a lumens race. Maybe it could be a nice, perfectly regulated runtime. I think right now, if I had to draw an analogy, it's almost like in the camera world. They were in a megapixels race for the longest time. Now you see like Nikon with the latest release of their D7500 electing to use the D500 sensor and 20 megapixels rather than continuing on to like 30 or 40 or whatever. But I would like to kind of see the flashlight world follow the same pattern, right? Instead of going after a lumens race, how about a perfectly regular runtime race, which Surefire kind of did for a while, but then kind of didn't. But to be fair, I haven't followed their lights in quite a while now. So anyway, kudos, Manker. I've really enjoyed these lights a lot. I would be very excited to see the changes I had highlighted for these LADs.